Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm Mike Maloney. How are you doing?
Mike is a very special guest of ours today. He is a customer of ours. We share some passions, especially regarding the Tesla Roadster. And he also has a very productive and large YouTube channel. Tell us about that. I think there are 1,200 videos out there is what I checked this morning.
I believe so. And we have 1 million. We've got more than 1.25 million views. 1.25 million views. And I think 875,000 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the channel, if you're interested, is Gold Silver. And
it's about precious metals, monetary history, and I do a lot on economics and the current state of the economy and what things are wrong. Typically, we've got politicians running everything, and not many of them know that much about economics, and so almost everything, there's more things being done wrong than there is done right. And all you have to do is look at history. History teaches great lessons.
Mm-hmm.
What have we done in the past? Did it work before? Right now, we're playing an extremely dangerous game, and hopefully it works out right. And I don't know what your audience thinks of the tariffs that we're currently trying, but right now, the world is at economic warfare, and it's the United States that declared war. And tariffs are, in general, a bad thing. Milton, I was just watching one video of Ronald Reagan, why he rejected tariffs, but another video with Milton Friedman was just so lucid. It was so good. He says, suppose you're, out at sea and you're stranded with several people in a boat, and one of them takes out a gun and shoots holes in the bottom of the boat. Do you take out your gun and shoot more holes in the bottom of the boat and everybody else? The tariffs just diminish world trade, shrink GDP, and should be throwing us into a very severe recession, if not a depression. And currently, because of this battle and all of the political posturing between Trump and Xi Jinping, we're now at 235% tariffs, is what the White House just announced like 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. Now that pretty much stops anything coming in from China, and they're retaliating with, they're not going to be exporting rare earth metals to us, which is a big choke point for the United States. I was planning on doing something that requires a lot of neodymium, and I'm the supplier of the parts that I'm looking for.
Now, might this be audio related, Mike, knowing that you're an audiophile?
Right. I used to have a couple of very high-end audio companies back in the 80s and 90s, and then I went into trade show production for high-end audio and home theater. And yes, there's a ribbon tweeter that it's the wholesale cost is like $2,000 per tweeter, but it's 24 pounds of, it's a foot tall, 24 pounds of neodymium and iron. Mm-hmm. And but it does some pretty spectacular things. And
a tweeter is a high-frequency speaker, basically.
Yes.
It handles all of the highs, and of course the neodymium. I can't even say that. Neodymium. Okay. Yeah. Is the magnet.
Yes, and that's the magnet in the Tesla motors and stuff too. There's a lot of neodymium in a Tesla, and it's absolutely necessary. And one of the few places that you can get it is China, and so it's a very dangerous game that we're playing that could either lead to great prosperity or a global depression.
So, Mike, there's so much to unpack here, but I thought maybe for the audience, if you could spend just a moment explaining what led you on this journey of becoming deeply involved in global economics.
Oh, okay. Well, my father died back in the late 80s, and he left my mother with an estate that should have taken care of her for the rest of her life just fine. And we interviewed a whole bunch of financial planners and gave control of things to the financial planner. And in the crash of the NASDAQ, to be fair to the guy, everything crashed. But when he lost about 2/3 of the estate during the 2000 bubble bursting, I just dove in. I was wondering why, because I also had seen how much the economy and the stock market tended to affect my own businesses, my high-end audio businesses, because on a luxury item, it just exaggerates whatever is happening with the economy. If things are booming, you do well, but when it's scary times, everybody pulls back on spending, and luxury items are the first to go. So it really was like whatever was happening to the economy times 10 was the business I was in. And so I tried to figure this out. What went wrong? Why did this financial planner lose so much of my mother's estate? And I ripped everything away from him, and I started studying the stock markets night and day. And at about the same time, I decided that I would write a book. Once I started studying the stock markets, you can't study the stock markets without studying the economy, and you can't study the economy without studying the global economy, because trade flows have a lot of influence in it. When you start studying the global economy and trade flows, that's where you run into the hard money advocates, because they're also the people that are really interested in monetary history and how history repeats. And then I became fascinated in how, when you can sort of predict what the future outcome is, it may take quite a bit longer than you think, or it might happen much quicker than you think. But if there's a certain fundamental setup and you can identify that same setup in the past, you're going to get some sort of, Mark Twain said, history never repeats, but it rhymes really. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
History doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes really well. Mm-hmm. I'm fond of saying that history always repeats, but with little twists, and those twists are the differences in the fundamental setup of where we are today. Are we in bubbles? Do we have a fiat currency system that can be expanded at will? All of these differences. And so I made a series, and that's really what got my YouTube channel. I've toured 18 countries, and we filmed a series called Hidden Secrets of Money. And it opens up with the first episode, and I'm standing in front of the pyramids. The second episode, I'm up on the Acropolis. And I sort of traced the history of money, but I showed how the first great inflation that was caused by deficit spending to fund the Peloponnesian Wars in Athens in 407 BC brought down the greatest empire. That right at that point, this was the largest accumulation of wealth ever in world history, and this advancement of architecture and knowledge and so on. And that pretty much ended because of debase. So I've got a bunch of gold eagles here, but King Croesus.
These are heavy. This is 1 ounce of gold, and it's amazing the weight that you have here.
Yeah, the density. King Croesus in I can't remember, 580 BC or so, in Lydia, which is now Turkey, he decided that the electrum, this naturally occurring mixture of gold and silver that people were mining and taking from riverbeds and so on, that was the predominant medium of exchange, but it was not yet money. He decided that it should be separated, refined into pure gold and pure silver, and minted into coins of equal weight. When they did that, that was the first time that things had a price. Before that, a merchant had to have scales, had to take a guess as to the purity of the gold or silver, and then weigh it, and then sell you something. It's interesting, in the 9,000 years of history of using mediums of exchange, And, the further you go back, the less clear the history is. But the entire world sort of gravitated toward gold and silver about the same time. Economies that were not connected. We didn't, Marco Polo had not yet gone to China when China went to gold and silver. But once gold and silver coinage of equal weights made their way down to Athens, the prototype of democracy, the first free market society, the first society that had a working tax structure, it just exploded in use. And that is what made Athens such a great culture. And then they got involved in a war with Sparta that lasted 27 years, and there was a 7-year truce in the middle, at which point they did not stop their spending. They finished the Temple of Athena Nike during that truce. So they didn't let their market economy heal from the expense of war. But they're minting coins, and they've got troops that are, not in Athens. So they're exporting currency out of Athens, and that caused a deflation. And they started taking the tax income of gold and silver, and you mix your gold with some copper and your silver with some copper. So if you take in 1,000 coins and you put in 50% copper, now you can mint 2,000. What is that called? That's deficit spending. That's what they were doing, was deficit spending, and it was the deficit spending to fund war, and they didn't have social programs yet, but they had public works. And that is what brought down Athens, and it became nothing but a satellite of the Roman Empire of it. And they lost the war with Sparta. And so it's just interesting how history keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating.
So having said that, currently your views on the tariffs, of course, are very focused. And, I was reading something yesterday that there are ships in China that aren't leaving the port. There are goods and service, or goods that are stockpiling at this point because there's no place to ship them, basically. You have some very definite parallels that you had mentioned regarding what happened during the Depression with the Smoot-Hawley Act, which was, again, tariffs.
Yeah.
And Janie, who's in the audience, by the way, the folks can't see her, actually Googled this and used AI. And she found out, she asked basically, what were the differences between the Smoot-Hawley imposed brand of tariffs and currently? So maybe you can address that a bit.
So I studied Smoot-Hawley when I was writing my first book. So that was way back in 2003, 4, and 5. So I don't remember the exact tariffs of it. You just read it, so you're probably...
Well, actually, I can tell you, all right.
Okay.
The first thing about Smoot-Hawley was that, and it was invoked by Congress rather than an executive order.
Okay, so this is 1930, right after the 1929 crash. And what happened here is the actions of both the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government turned what should have been a severe recession into the Great Depression, and Smoot-Hawley was a key factor in doing that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It was, and so they were at that time averaging about 40% on 20,000 imported goods. Today, they say the tariffs tend to be far more targeted. So, unlike back then. In 1930, there was also no multilateral trade organization, and Congress simply voted in sweeping increases without external checks. Today, they say the U.S. operates within the World Trade Organization's rules-based system. How do you feel about that?
Working within the World Trade Organization system, we're not actually working within it because they recommend against these tariffs. Any sane economist would recommend. All you're doing is slowing down global trade, and we're doing this at a time where we were overdue to go into another recession. If you look at the Atlanta Fed's forecast, it says that we're this quarter right now that we're in is going to be a contraction, and if that continues for another quarter, that's officially a recession. And the these are the world's two greatest economies, we sort of declared economic war on all economies, and 80 countries want to make a deal right now. They don't want this, so they will drop their barriers to trade if we drop ours. But China doesn't want to be pushed around, and they are pushing back, and they've pushed back big time. And it's the two largest economies in the world. And this could actually crash the world economy, this fight, if it doesn't get resolved and get resolved soon. We really need it resolved. This video that I was watching of Ronald Reagan explaining the reason that he wouldn't do tariffs is, and what has happened in Argentina. Once you put up this protectionist wall, and by the way, I'm a sort of a libertarian, and so I find myself sort of standing in the middle, watching the left and the right. So I'm not pro one political party or another. I'm pro the least amount of political intervention in the economy as possible. But Reagan was saying, and this is exactly what has just happened in what happened in Argentina up until now. You put up these protectionist barriers, and your own industry doesn't have to work as hard and compete, and you end up with lower quality goods that couldn't compete on the world market because they've been protected. It makes business lazy and less nimble and less, when a company is competing in a free market, almost everything is like you got to try things all the time, and it's almost like an emergency. You got to do it now. You got to cut costs. You got to make a better product. You've got to serve more people. That's what people get rich in capitalism, not because they're hoarding anything, but because they serve the maximum number of people, and they make the best product at the lowest price. That's what capitalism does. And once you put up protectionist walls, you don't have to do that anymore. And you become uncompetitive in the global markets. And that's what happened to Argentina. And now we're seeing a turnaround of that. When Milei took office in Argentina, they had already gone into a recession. And it was projected that all of his cuts and everything would cause that recession to go on for another 2 years. And it was over with within just a couple of months. And they were showing massive GDP growth right away from free market policies. And so the Smoot-Hawley, I really should. I'm just doing so much right now, so many different things. It's very difficult for me to sit and really compare Smoot-Hawley to what's going on today. But I know that Smoot-Hawley, along with actions by the Federal Reserve, is what took a bad recession and turned it into the Great Depression. So
we actually have a question up there. Then I have a question about GDP for you as well, and the work that Elon's doing in government. But this is from one of our account managers next door, Mark Beach. He says, if you don't approve of tariffs, what do you think is the best way to address the massive trade imbalance? Under Biden, he had the 4 largest trade deficits in the last 20 years, and his 4 years plus 49% over Trump.
Yeah, well, we get to print currency and people send us real stuff. So being the world's reserve currency is one of the things that causes the trade imbalance. The trade imbalance, if you look at charts going way back, it's really started right after Nixon took us off of gold in '71. But this is something that is left over from the Bretton Woods agreements of 1944 when the U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency. And there's, I believe it is the Triffin paradox, or it's an economic law that I think his name was Robert Triffin came up with, that being if there's one reserve currency, there's demand for that currency in the rest of the world always. So we have to be an exporter of currency, which means we need to be an importer of goods to be able to export that currency. When we used gold, and the entire world was on a gold standard, and by the way, I've often said gold standards suck. Gold is great, but gold standards are just a way of being able to cheat gold again. But gold naturally balances all economies. Anything that is limited, that cannot be created via government fiat at a whim. If it can't be created out of thin air, if the government wants to do a bunch of deficit spending, they have to borrow in the private markets. When they borrow in the private markets, interest rates go up. When interest rates go up, business slows down, and the government, there's a certain balance where the government actually gets less revenue because as they borrow more and more, they slow down tax revenues because the economy slows down. So the gold standard actually was better at keeping us out of war. And we went on to this fiat currency standard because of World War I and World War II. If you look at it, there were enormous gold inflows into the United States because we weren't in it in the wars early on. And then when we did get involved, we were making loans where all of the combatants in Europe had to take all of their young men off of the farms and turn them into soldiers, meaning they had to import all of their grains. So we became huge exporters during World War I and World War II. We got paid in gold. The U.S. gold stocks went up 70% during World War I and another 117% during World War II. By the end of World War II, the U.S. had 2/3 of all the world's monetary gold and half of all of the above-ground gold in the world, including private gold, as our as our currency reserves, as our monetary reserves, and that meant, and Europe was broke. They had spent all of their gold, and so we really needed to. But we had loaned them dollars and U.S. treasuries, and so since their central banks were full of U.S. dollars and treasuries, we ended up on the Bretton Woods system, where the U.S. is the hub. What was that original question again? Because I just took a huge detour.
Well, actually, it leads us into what I'm interested in as well, which is the amount of recovery that is taking place in the federal government right now, the fraud that's being uncovered, and its impact on GDP, which you enlightened me, which I never even thought would be an unintended consequence.
Well, before, Elon Musk talks about raising GDP by getting rid of the encumbrances that the government imposes on businesses. With all of the licensing and regulation, and there's way too much of it. I mean, we just got past April 15th, and everybody that's in business has to take out several days of not working on their business, but working on this compliance for the government. All of your tax forms and accounting and everything else. And the more the government imposes, the more of your time that is wasted. And so we needed to lift regulation a little bit and allow private industry to raise GDP before cutting it. And the Doge team identified $500 billion worth of fraud and theft right away, and they're not done. So it's going to be over $1 trillion eventually that gets cut out of federal spending. However, even though it's fraud and it's theft, somebody ends up with it. And if it's fraud like Social Security fraud, and it's not going to a rich person, that's going to be spent as gasoline and groceries right away. It goes right back into GDP. And if it's somebody that is just scamming the system and they are already rich, it's going to go into the stock market or into real estate or something like that. But every dollar that they are cutting out of, and they should.
Retrieving and saving.
Yes.
Is not going to feed GDP.
Right. And so they needed to do this in a different order. Luke Groman, I think, of Forest Before the Trees, said that it's akin to giving oneself a root canal with a shotgun, effective but fatal. And so this coupled with the fact that we were going into a recession anyway, it was time for one. And when you measure like the stock market, there is no way that you can measure the stock market that doesn't show it in the greatest bubble in history, with the exception of PE ratios. A PE ratio is the price of the stock compared to the earnings of the company per share. And right now, that's showing that we're in the third biggest bubble in history. But any way you measure it, we're coming from a bubble and then doing this thing that should cause GDP to contract. And then at the same time, we're doing all these tariffs. So you've got the contraction of GDP just from Doge saving us all of this fraud and theft. And so they're doing a very good thing. But it's very dangerous to be playing this, we're in this.
It's about timing. It probably might have been better to wait a bit to cut all the fraud and all of the waste.
Right. And then this standoff that we've got with China right now, I do believe that, in my book, I show all of the different monetary systems that we've, we had the classical gold standard before World War I, and then we got into World War I. Everybody stopped redemption rights. All of the countries in Europe lit up the printing presses and did deficit spending. And that caused huge imbalances, and pressures build up. These economic imbalances build up. The whole system starts to crumble, and then they have an emergency economic conference, and we had the Genoa conference, I believe it was 1922. And the world went on a new monetary system, and instead of the Bank of England being the hub of the gold standard, it was now the Bank of England and the New York Federal Reserve. And that's how this is part of this monetary history, is part of what made the U.S. so big and powerful. It isn't that we are smarter than everybody else or work harder than everybody else. Part of it is our free markets. Part of it is an open economy where we discuss everything. And, during our space race, anything that went wrong in the USSR, they did not disclose. But everything, all of our failings in the United States were discussed about, and we beat them. Even where everything there is government mandated, and a huge portion of their economy was going toward that space race. By comparison, very small portion of ours. But yes, we when you include the $500 billion that we've already identified, and it's probably going to end up being over $1 trillion by the time Doge team is done, with these tariffs going up, with the fact that we're in massive bubbles everywhere, and we're overdue for a recession anyway, this could be an economically lethal mixture. And I'm very worried about it. And this is one of the reasons you're seeing gold soar right now. However, it isn't really the public that's buying gold and silver right now. And silver, they just manipulated again. It's a very small market, like 1/300th the size of the gold market. And they raised margin requirements on futures by 25%. That's huge. The Commodities Exchange, the CFTC,
okay,
and the COMEX. They, when they do this, anybody that is leveraged, where they've put a certain percentage down, and they get, typically you can put 10% or 20% down, and you get 5 times more position than it's the same thing you can do with stocks if you've got a margined trading account at your brokerage house. So you're basically borrowing to fund your position that you're taking. And when they raise margin requirements, it means you've got to get liquid and cough up a bunch of cash. Right. And that means liquidating something. Mm-hmm. And so silver took a big hit, and that was like 2 weeks ago or something like that. But that has raised the gold-silver ratio. It takes over 100 ounces of silver right now to buy one of these. And historically, for 2,500 years, this is normally at around 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. And then for the last 200 years, it's been way out of whack there. But we are in a rarefied territory where silver has never been this undervalued compared to gold in the last 2,500 years for only 10 weeks mm-hmm. during that period of time. So, and silver will catch up.
So if there's any investment advice in any of this, it would be that silver is undervalued at this point in time, is what I get.
That's my theory. I do not give investment advice. I tell people what I do, and I have a lot of silver. I've got pallets of silver eagles. I've got far more silver than gold because I studied the performance of the last bull market, and silver is such an incredibly small market. And when gold gets to about $5,000 an ounce, people are going to be looking at it and going, oh, well, you know, this was only $250 an ounce back in the year 2000. Maybe it's already had its run. It seems pretty expensive. How much is that silver stuff? Oh, well, it's at this extraordinary ratio of 100 to 1. And this is what happened in late 79. People shifted their preference from gold to silver right at the end of 79, and silver just took off like a rocket. And gold went up during that bull market that was 8.5 years, from August 15th of 71 until January of 1980. Gold went up a factor of 25.3 times, I believe, but silver was 41.7 or 40.
Oh, I remember when the Hunt brothers were trying to corner the market.
Yeah, you know, I hear that all. Oh, that's when the Hunt. People try to dismiss silver's performance because they go, oh, that's when the Hunt brothers were trying to corner the market. I went, myself and my researchers went through a stack of books on the Hunt brothers this tall. You know, I'm dyslexic, so I had a duplexing scanner with optical character recognition, and I would buy a book and have the binding sliced off at a printer and run it through this scanner, and then have the text converted so that I could have the computer read to me. But I mean, we really dove into this deep, and then I interviewed probably the world's expert on precious metals flows and so on, Jeff Christian of CPM Group. He used to be part of Goldman Sachs, and he left just to focus on precious metals, especially gold and silver. So he audits every mine to see what came out of that mine, the refineries, and then where it goes to, jewelry, silverware, and they come out with an annual report on it. But I interviewed him back in probably 2004, and I asked him what he thought of the Hunt brothers, because my theory was that, I'll get to my theory in a second. He said that the Hunt brothers added 50 to 75 cents at the most to the price of silver. It was really the public changing their preference. When gold hit $400 an ounce, it had been $35 an ounce just a few years before. So that seemed like a major move, like it was all over with, and back then in January 1980. The average American made a little under $10,000 per year. And so the average guy might go to the bank and take out $500 or $1,000, and that may have been his life savings. I don't know. But rushes to a coin shop and says, I want to buy gold too, and they plop one coin in his hand. And oh, is that all I can get?
That's all I get.
That's when he says, how much is the silver? Well, back then you could get like 50. So, you know, now you can get 100. And in 1980, when it peaked, when gold and silver peaked, silver's value had gone from 1/50th of gold's value to 1/14th of gold's value. So it only took 14 ounces of silver to buy it. So that's the reason I'm heavily invested in silver. But when I first started my company, goldsilver.com, as a precious metals dealer, I started it in a spare bedroom in my house. And now we're one of the major online precious metals dealers, and where we can put it in your IRA, open a storage account for you at Brinks, or deliver it to your door, put it in trusts, put it in partnerships. Anyway, boy, I shouldn't have said that. I just forgot my train of thought. But I used to tell people early on that, yes, I'm fully diversified. I've got both gold and silver because those were my only investments. Right. But now my investments include the Tesla Roadster. And so I have 7, and my business partner has 3. So between us, we've got 10 here at your place.
We store them, by the way.
Yeah.
EV Preserve is our roadster storage business, and it specializes in the cars. We keep them charged, and a little bit of a sales pitch here, right?
Yeah, well, I absolutely believe that these cars are going to, like, right now you can get a Roadster for around $100,000, right? And I believe those $100,000 cars are at least $500,000 cars, if not $1 million cars, someday in the future. And then I was lucky enough to, you found one that was the lowest mileage Tesla Roadster on Earth.
38 miles.
Right,
Yes.
okay. So it was delivered to the customer with 37 miles on it. The customer drove it 1 mile on his own property, never titled the car, so it hasn't been registered. There's a receipt from Tesla, but it's never been titled. Put it in a garage, and there it sat until I bought it a year and 4 months ago. And so my business partner and I bought it jointly, and I believe that one day will be a $10 million car. There's just all of these reasons. The Tesla Roadster is the car that caused the 4th turning of the automotive industry. It's rare that an introduction of a vehicle causes the entire industry to somehow have to shift or catch up. And if you look at the history, Carl Benz, I believe it was 1886, came out with the Benz patent Motorwagen, a little tricycle with a 1-cylinder, 3/4 horsepower engine, and he sold 25 of them. That started the automotive industry. For over 100 years, there had been little scientific curiosities of cars that could move without any assistance from a horse.
Right. Motorized carriages, basically.
Yeah, right, yeah. And, the first ones actually were electric. And then the very first one, I believe, was steam, and then electric. But that started the automotive industry. And then in 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T, and that killed off the majority of automotive manufacturers. Before World War I, there were more than 1,300 American automotive manufacturers. Now, a lot of these would start up and go out of business in 2 years after building 3 cars. But still, there were probably like 300 car companies that Henry Ford put out of business by dropping the price of an internal combustion vehicle by 2/3. Then the next car after that, I have to sort of back up a little, is the 1912 Cadillac. In the year 1900, electric cars were predominant. More than half of all the cars registered in America were electric. And there was about 30% steam, and only like 18% or so were internal combustion. Why? You had to crank them, and 1 out of every 3 owners, they were dangerous. 1 out of every 3 owners ended up with a broken arm. So even though it was the least expensive technology, people were afraid of it. And besides that, they vibrated, they were noisy, steam cars drove really well, but electric cars drove the best. They were just the most expensive, and you had to replace the batteries like every 3 years, which was 1/3 the cost of the car or more. And so when the 1912 Cadillac came, got to go back again. In 1910, the best friend of the chief engineer of Cadillac stopped to help a lady that had stalled by the side of the road, cranked her car, it kicked back, it broke his jaw, and he died a month later from an infection. The chief engineer of Cadillac started a crash program to develop the automated starting device for the internal combustion engine, and Charles Kettering at Bendix was the guy that created the electric starter in the 1912 Cadillac, introduced that, and by 1928, the last steam went extinct right away. But by 1928, the last electric car company folded, and for the next 80 years, people tried to build a compelling electric car that the public would buy, and they always failed until the Tesla Roadster reached the right balance of price, range, charge time, battery life, and performance.
And aesthetics.
Okay,
Sports
aesthetics
car.
too, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll add one there. I'm running out of fingers, so. And that has caused the 4th, and you can see we're right on target for this S-curve adoption, even with all of this save democracy, burn a Tesla stuff that's happening.
Temporary.
Right, it's temporary. But what's going to happen is 10 years from now, there's not going to be any internal combustion vehicles made. And collectors will finally realize that, oh my gosh, it's that little Tesla Roadster that started everything. And these cars are going to go from 100,000 to 1 million. And because how many do you estimate survive in the Western Hemisphere?
I don't know the Western Hemisphere. Globally, there are about 2,000 on our Roadster census on our website that are accounted for at this point, which is remarkable because there were 2412 made or released.
Okay. 2,000. Well, I know that of the almost 2,400, there were about 1,500 that went to the Western Hemisphere. So, and then so there's probably two. You know, when Tesla was when they came out with the Model S, they had a buyback program for the Roadster, and they've been using those for parts, right? Yeah, and so a whole bunch came off the road and have been disassembled.
Just over 100, we calculate about 110, 120 or so.
And then there's ones like my first one. Some kid lost control of his car and hit me, and it was totaled. Spectacular accident.
Yeah. But you walked away from it.
I got out of the car and I took pictures, but his car actually it was so bad, the entire left side of my car was just completely ripped off, including the door. The door isn't supposed to come off, but the whole door jamb. It distorted the frame, and then I had all of these scratches on my arm from the front of that guy's car, brushing my arm at 50 miles an hour.
Wow. Yeah. By the way, a quick plug for Jesse and the team here. For those of you interested in how many Roadsters are left, where are they, our website has a pin map under the census program, and you can actually see how many are in the United States, for example. If you look at a map of the U.S., you'll see little dots with numbers on them, so you can see where they're regionalized. And it's been a very... Exactly, yes, the lost ones. What color are those? I think black or gray, I think. Right. So, yeah, and it's primarily the user community or the owners that are making this list more accurate, and we want to thank everybody. Continue to do so. Go to the website, feed that census program, and register your Roadster. There's another reason that it's vital, we feel. Tesla never knew how many were left. And there's always this risk, will they continue to support it? Because technically they don't have to.
Right.
You know, after, 16 years, I mean, they could easily abandon it and say, just upgrade to a Model 3 or Model Y or something else. Right. But it's important for them, we feel, to know how many are left in the world, how many owners are still there. And, of course, they're a passionate bunch, just like you. We love these cars. Yeah.
You know, when you look at this, not just from the automotive industry perspective, but what collectors are going to be learning over the next several years about the Tesla Roadster. Only car in space. Yeah. That one does sometimes 70,000 miles an hour in parts of its orbit, making it the Tesla Roadster is the fastest car in the universe.
What a 0 to 60, huh?
Right. And then, so that part's sort of like a joke. But then it's connected with the Elon Musk story. I mean, forget John DeLorean, Preston Tucker, and even Henry Ford. There's no story there compared to Elon Musk. So you put all of these things together, and I just think you're looking at, a car with a lot of mileage being a $500,000 car one day. And cars that are like the 38-mile Roadster, I'm expecting that to be a $10 million car.
Yeah. Yeah. So having talked about some of your investments, we know you're in gold and silver.
Yeah.
Lots of silver. But I happen to know that you also are in Tesla stock. Tell us why and what you feel about its future.
Well, as long as Elon Musk is alive, Tesla is destined to be the world's largest company, period. And it's going to be by a long shot. The second place is going to be way, way, way back there, because if you just take the robotics division, Optimus and whatever else they come out with, that measured alone would be by far the largest company on the planet. And after that is probably Tesla Energy, the battery packs and the solar. And after that is probably Tesla licensing, because they've cracked full self-driving I mean, it's going to be released as a test. I think Elon Musk, in some appearance, said June, which is just right around the corner, in Austin, the robo-taxis. So by sometime next year, full self-driving is going to be so comprehensive, so well done, that it should be able to be released all over, and it's going to be a lot safer than a human driver. And then every year, it's that safety factor is going. First it'll be twice as safe or 5 times as safe, and then after a while it's going to be 10, 20, 100 times as safe as a human driver. Mm-hmm. What do you think happens to insurance rates then? Ones on Tesla go down, so insurance companies can't make a profit. Well, they are making a profit, actually, but a lot of that gets transferred to other cars, making the Tesla even less expensive to own compared to their competitors. And their competitors have to start licensing full self-driving from Tesla. And Tesla, so by the way, right now, I tried to get, I've got a Cybertruck up on my farm, and I bought full self-driving for both of my Model 3s. My farm manager has purchased one of my Model 3s from me. But on the Cybertruck, I can't buy it. I can only rent it for $99 a month, and I don't want to. I want to buy it. Mm-hmm. The reason is it's not going to stay $99 forever. Mm-hmm. It's going to be $99 for the first couple of years, but then once other companies start having to license it, it'll probably be $200 a month, and then Tesla will get $100 a month from every car sold from every other company on the planet. Mm-hmm. And so that division would probably come in, and then after that is the car company. And here's the stupid thing, is all of the stock analysts are analyzing it as though it's a car company.
Exactly.
And it's not a car company. It's a technology company. And when they couple robotics and the cars with XAI and Grok, it's going to be, you're not riding around in a car. You're riding around in a computer that happens to have wheels on.
Yeah. What we typically say is Ford is a car company.
Yeah.
Tesla is not a car company anymore.
Right. And, it's interesting, all this save democracy, burn a Tesla. What's the most American car company that there is?
There's a real irony in all of this,
right.
Isn't there? It's
General
almost
Motors
humorous.
is 52% American parts. Right. So it's 52% American. And Tesla is basically 100%, right near there.
So Mike is actually multifaceted, and I would like you to talk a little bit about this endeavor in Puerto Rico. That's such a fascinating story.
Okay, well, everything I do has to have a mission to it. And
I noticed that.
So my personal mission is just to try to achieve maximum prosperity for all of humanity. My goldsilver.com, my precious metals dealership, was to save the middle class one investor at a time. My media team and Hidden Secrets of Money, that video series I talked about, it's 10 parts. Oh, by the way, you should watch episodes 8, 9, and 10 especially, and then episode 4, How Currency is Created, is my most popular episode with about 16 million views, I think. Let me see. Oh, the mission of the media team is to enlighten the world that maximum prosperity can only be achieved through individual freedom, free markets, and sound money. And this is a measurable fact. It's something that is very measurable. And so with the farm, it's to reverse the environmental impact of modern farming techniques while creating healthier, tastier food. And so I bought a 900-acre farm at the very top of Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico, my farm, is an absolutely unique piece of property when it comes to being able to do these experiments with natural farming at a profit so that it doesn't go out of business. Because right now, chemical monoculture farming has become very expensive because of the cost of all the chemical inputs, all of the herbicides, the pesticides, and the chemical fertilizers. But permaculture farming, where you don't disturb the soil, it's a natural method of farming, but it's got a lower crop yield, and you have to mix the crops up. You can't do 100, when you do 100 acres of corn, you get an explosion of pests, so you have to hit it with pesticides all the time. If you plant a monocrop anywhere, you're going to attract a certain type of pest that multiplies very rapidly. But when you do a row of, say, corn and a row of onions and a row of tomatoes and a row of rosemary and a row of broccoli and a row of garlic, it confuses the pests, and you don't need the pesticides at all. And when you do need a pesticide, what we use is hot sauce.
Really?
You spray them with some really hot sauce.
Right.
The plant is unaffected. The plant loves it, but the pests don't. And then right now the world is in the midst of the 6th mass extinction event in the planet's history. It's called the Anthropocene extinction event. Now scientists agree that it's happening, but they don't know if we're currently, the estimates are that we are somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times higher than the normal background rate of species going extinct. Now, I don't know if we are the cause of climate change. That is, Anthropocene extinction event, that's what we're in. Anthropocene means the human epoch. So currently the name of it suggests that we are the responsible for it. But what I do know is that when you look back, and the reason I say I don't know if climate change is real or not is because if you look back before Al Gore's data and you go back hundreds of millions of years and billions of years, there are times on this planet where temperature goes up first and then CO2 follows. So that's very contradictory to what we're being taught. But what I do know for certain is that there's no times in history where the balance of the gases in our atmosphere changes at the current rate of change that doesn't go along with a mass extinction event. So perhaps we should slow down this experiment that we are conducting. And we don't necessarily, AI and robotics, and we have a very bright future. It's going to take care of all of this. It'll figure it out. Right now, we don't know, and we just need to slow down this changing of the balance of gases in our atmosphere. And farming is the only thing that mankind does naturally not naturally right now, artificially, but massively on a global scale that can be turned from atmospheric carbon positive to atmospheric carbon negative. Natural farming is carbon negative. 50 to 70% of every plant grows below ground, and all of the carbon dioxide it breathes in its life, and then it splits off the oxygen and exhales that and uses the carbon to build its cell structure and the complex carbohydrates that it needs to survive, and that the animals that eat it need to survive, and that the animals that eat the animals that eat it need to survive. So we're mixing this permaculture farming techniques with pasture-raised livestock and chickens. We're going to have a lot of chickens doing pasture. We'll probably be producing around 100,000 pasture eggs a day.
Really?
100,000 chickens is
Okay.
the target. And but right behind these mobile chicken coops, giant compost piles. And we're going to be enriching those with something called biochar, which you bake any organic material like wood or food scraps or whatever at very high temperature, and you get something that looks like charcoal, but it's not. It's just empty carbon. It's like an apartment building for fungus and bacteria, all the microbes that can populate this thing. And you mix it with the compost, and then you put that into the soil, and it just supercharges the soil, where in a month and a half, we had cabbage plants with a spread on the leaves like, almost 3 feet in a month and a half, and tomato plants that were more than 3 feet tall. And in the tropics, you've got this really an inch and a half of topsoil, and then it's just clay, really bad soil. And so if we can cover the ground with 6 to 8 inches of this enriched compost with the biochar and then plow it down 18 inches, it makes the soil rich, fertile, and very permeable so that it hangs on to rain. But the whole point is to, when you bury this biochar, you're sequestering atmospheric carbon dioxide for up to 1,000 years. And it can be a great additive for cement. And so we're working on this project where we really are trying to save the world. But the climate where I'm at, it's the highest large farm in Puerto Rico. And that makes it somewhere between 8 and like 16 or 18 degrees cooler than all the other farms. So I can compete against farmers in California and Canada that have to come through something called the Jones Act, this ancient discriminatory law where everything has to be shipped from an American port. We can't, in Puerto Rico, we can't import tomatoes directly from Mexico or South America.
Really?
It has to go up to New Jersey or Florida, get put on a different boat. There's 2 companies that don't really compete. And then because Puerto Rico doesn't really produce anything, you've got to buy a round-trip fare, the ticket price, for a one-way trip, basically, because that boat is going to come back empty. And so because of that, it raises the cost of the imported foods some 10 to 40% higher, meaning that we're going to compete. I want to compete against California farmers where they're harvesting some broccoli. It goes on a truck to a warehouse. The next day it goes onto a train. It spends 4 days going across America and then goes to a warehouse. The next day it gets put on a boat and spends another 4 or 5 days going to Puerto Rico, where it then goes into a warehouse and the next day. So everything you buy in Puerto Rico in the markets is already like 2 weeks old. And 85% of all the food that they consume comes from outside of Puerto Rico. So I'm growing broccoli, tomatoes, lettuce, asparagus, celery. Our asparagus is phenomenal. And I grew up in California, and that's pretty much where all the asparagus comes from. I've never tasted asparagus as good until I tasted it from my farm. And we're up near the peak of Puerto Rico. And we share a mile-long border with Toro Negro State Park, and there are no trails or paths. That's where my main river comes from. And so,
how many rivers on your property?
3.
3. Okay.
3.
And the other thing that fascinated me was at the peak of your property, you see the Caribbean and the Atlantic.
Yes, yeah, we've got a view of about 25% of the coast of Puerto Rico on both the north and the south, so you can see the oceans on both sides.
Now, wasn't there also an interesting story about the ability to purchase this land in Puerto Rico, 900 acres? Ownership, I thought you said at one point, was somewhat restricted, and
well, I'm the second. The farm was established in 1865, and I'm the second owner.
Okay, all right.
I bought it through a limited liability company that has an Act 60 tax grant and what's called a bona fide farmer certificate, making it exempt from all import duties, sales tax, excise tax, and 90% income tax exempt. So you only declare 10% of your income, basically.
Wow.
And so when you add all of these things together, we should be able to conduct this experiment of doing permaculture farming techniques at a profit. Now, working with the local agricultural colleges, what I want to do is try and discover techniques that bring that cost of permaculture down below chemical monoculture, and we will have just changed the world because all other farmers will adopt it simply because it's more profitable. And so, it makes their lives easier, and it makes all of us healthier.
Well, Mike, you are by far, I think, the most interesting guest that we've ever had on this podcast. Would you guys agree?
Agreed.
We could probably go on for days yet. We're hitting 11 o'clock here, so we've run this for an hour. We will be broadcasting this on our YouTube channel, and the social media team is usually very good about splitting this into shorts. There are a lot of topics that we covered.
Okay. The website is freedomfarmspr.com, and I think we'll have like info. So if you're interested, give us a shout.
Absolutely.
If you want to help change the world and make it a better place for your children, contact us.
Mike, thank you for being a wonderful guest, and thank all the people that joined us. We didn't see too many comments today, but at least Mark was there.
Listening.
Yeah.
By the way, can I make one more little plug? Okay, I wrote the 2 best-selling books on investing in precious metals, and my first one was with Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Group, and that was Rich Dad's Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. But my second book, The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century, what I like to do is create a book where people are going, oh, this is a get-rich-quick book. I want to buy that. I want to get rich. And then I sneak in all of this monetary history and economics, and I give them an education, and only 20% of it is about gold and silver. The rest is really, if you learn these things, it benefits you for the rest of your life. I guarantee it. And so the book is available on Amazon. It's The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. And if you go to GGSR 21, so Great Gold and Silver Rush 21, GGSR21.com, I think right now there's 3 free chapters on there, so you can read them. First chapter is basically how people can construct charts that lie to you, and it's very difficult. You really got to pay attention. But once you know these things, you never allow somebody else to skew your perception again. So that's free. Download them, send them to anybody you want. We don't even ask for your email address on this website, GGSR21. The next one is the hardest chapter in the book, and it's how currency is created, but it's very important. My 2 research assistants and I took a 4-year deep dive into the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the Government Accountability Office, and we really take apart how currency is created. The things that Ben Bernanke did, the next bust that we have really is the Bernanke bust, because it caused distortions to the economy that are just absolutely enormous. And then we know the Fed's playbook, by the way. If there is another crisis, it's print and drop interest rates to 0, right? That's the playbook. That's the only thing they know. They've got 2 hammers. Everything has to look like a nail. So anyway.
So, Mike, yes, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you all in the audience for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.